Growing up a TMNT fan, did your room look like this, and did you own these bed sheets? Are you in your 30s or 40s and still have these on your bed? Are you a grown-ass man and either you or you asked your significant other or mother to turn the flat sheet into curtains? I did. I had my mom make me curtains, and she even crocheted me these turtles of the same design. And on this episode, we are building a diorama based on this classic design. In my last episode, I did make a challenge where I asked you, the audience, to create your own, send them in, and then we will do a live stream and go over everyone's work. So there's still a month to go. April 1st is the deadline. I'll leave the details in the description below, or you can go back and watch that previous video. And what gave me this idea is one day I was in one of the TMNT Facebook groups and someone did a diorama based on the old retro vintage Playmates card backs. And I thought that was such a cool idea to display a figure or two. And I started thinking what other designs would be cool to build a diorama. So that's what led us here. And I wasn't going to do the challenge without doing the diorama myself. So let's get into the build and I'll show you how I did it. First, I'm going to measure what I think is my tallest figures. The NECA TMNT movie figures come in at about 7 inches tall, so I have to cut my foam and my base to make sure that it fits all of them. Once I do that and they all fit onto the base, then I know all of my other figures will fit onto this just right. And I'm making a simple frame out of foam, and I'm just using that figure just to make sure that the height is correct, and there will be some overhang, so I just want to make sure that none of the figures are obstructed. Then I'm going to go ahead and magnetize this. Now, going through this, I put way too many magnets on it. Not sure, I just kind of got in a mode and had at it. But you really don't need this many magnets. I just went a little crazy with them. Once all of my magnets are complete on the frame, then I'm going to start working on the backdrop and the front. So I'm just going to take all of the frame and press it onto the backdrop and the front, and then make those impressions, and then I know where to Dremel out the holes for the magnets. All of my magnetization is done. This thing is pretty sturdy, so it's not going to go anywhere, and I pretty much made myself a nice little foam briefcase. So we're going to cut a hole out into the front, and then we'll get going on the details. Now I'm just measuring out all of the edges. I want to make sure that there's a nice hole cut out, but with enough room to see all of the figures. So I want to at least have some overhang on all 4 sides. I'm going to cut out this hole with my hot foam wire tool, and then I'm going to save this piece of foam and use in future projects. Just double checking to make sure all of my figures fit. Everything fits perfectly, so now we're going to start working on some details. Now, looking at a 2-dimensional design and turning it into a 3-dimensional diorama, I really want to have some depth. So that box that we've made is going to act as more of a shadow box, and then I'm going to make these stones out of these thin pieces of foam. I'm just tracing out some very rough shapes, and then I'm going to use my hot foam wire tool to cut out all of these stones, glue them to the top, and then we'll get painting. And I figured it would be easier to give all of these stones texture while they're still one piece. Figure that would be easier than cutting them out and then trying to do them all individually. I'm going to use my hot foam wire table to cut out all the stones, and then we'll get them glued on. Now first, I just wanted to practice, so I laid out all of the stones, and I'm just going to use some Mod Podge, painting each individual stone and then placing it where I want it on the border of this diorama. After that, then I'll give it a prime and then some color. Using some Mod Podge and black acrylic paint, I'm going to mix those together, paint this thing black, and now we're going to start using the brown. So I wasn't sure which one to go with, but I matched it up to the bed sheet, and it seems like this darker version will be better. So this is a honey brown, gave everything a fresh coat of that. That'll be my base coat, and then we will start on the details. And we're going to paint the inside of the border white. It looks like where the turtles are standing is all white with some brown mixed in. So we'll dry brush later, but right now on the front of the border, we're going to dry brush with some white. So all of that rolling that we did with the aluminum foil ball is really going to make these details pop, and it's getting closer to looking like the actual bed sheets once I add this detail or layer of white on. So I think it's looking really good. We're going to continue this and then get started with our border. And because more or less this diorama will be a shadow box, I don't want it to be too dark. So right now I'm marking different measurements of where I want some lights to go. I'm going to press these puck lights in, and then I'm going to Dremel out the indentations with my rotary tool. And I got this idea from a good friend of the channel, Titus. He has a channel where he does dioramas as well. I'll put the link down in the description below. I've wanted to do this to my channel 6 for the interior offices, so I was really glad to try it out for this. So I'll probably go back to my channel 6 and put these lights in this way. This way there's no permanent gluing. If you need to take them out and swap the batteries, it's easy to do so. Now before I start painting this thing white, I forgot to texture it, so even if it's primed, you can still take that ball of aluminum foil and still roll it over the prime. So I did that before painting the white, and now it will be ready for dry brushing once this dries. And I'm going to give the backdrop a red coat, so I'm just going to take some red paint, make sure that I'm giving it a nice full coat, and then we can get started on some dry brushing. So I think this is matching the bed sheet design pretty well. You can see all of those aluminum foil rolls are really popping with the dry brush, so just giving it a really light coat of this brown, and it's getting the look I want. Next I'm going to carve out some rocks. I know Leonardo in the design has 1 foot up on a rock, so I want to make sure that I have that for some of the figures that I'll display. So just taking some spare pieces of foam, scraping them up, and then we'll prime and paint as well. And while I'm waiting for those rocks to dry, I decided to paint the back a different color because the pillowcase that comes with the bed sheets is reversible. So in case I ever wanted that as an option, I'll just have to swap it. And one last detail on the border, I'm putting some line work with my paint pen. Just an extra added detail from the design that I wanted to make sure I included in this build. Now I own this 3D printed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles logo, and I was just going to put that on, but felt like cheating if I'm showing you a scratch build. So one of my favorite things to do is just print out something, cut it out with my X-Acto knife, and then use it as a stencil. So I'm going to cut out all of the letters and then transfer that onto Silly Winks, which is one of my favorite materials to work with, and I'll trace the stencils that I made out of paper onto the Silly Winks, and then using my X-Acto knife again to then cut out the final materials that I'll use on the diorama. Finishing up cutting out all of the letters, now it's time to start painting, and I found one of the easiest ways to paint all these separate pieces is tape. So now I'm just going to place all of the letters onto the tape, making my world a heck of a lot easier. So nice little trick, just place them on the tape, paint them, and then you can peel them off when you're done adding your coats. So I cut all of these letters onto that Silly Winks material, like I said, painting the smaller letters white, the border red, and the background black. And then I found this really great green that we'll use for the turtle letters. So I'm just going to take my paint pen again, line everything with black, and then start adding in those little cracks or those shell details onto the larger letters. Now I'm going to start gluing the smaller letters onto the border, and this seemed to be probably the hardest part of the diorama, just keeping the letters straight. If I ever want to go back and redo this, it won't be too bad, but for now I was able to get them on the border and fit all the letters on without a problem. Then I did the same thing with the larger letters, just making sure that I'm getting them glued on in the right place, and then after this I'll just have to glue the red border onto the base piece, and then this can go onto the diorama. Now that my logo is done, I'm just gonna hot glue it to the top of the border, just like the pillowcase, and then I think this project is complete. There you have it, folks. Here is my entry into my own challenge, the Tmnt inspired vintage bedsheet diorama. That's a mouthful. But, you know, this was a really fun way to just build something that wasn't too difficult, something that I think other people can do, and then just really create that extra showpiece in your room that you can throw some figures on. So I have my animated figures on here now, but you saw before you can really put whatever characters you want on here. If I was going to do one that was inspired completely by Mutant Mayhem, maybe I would have done a completely purple one, but I figured keeping it this way would be more versatile and I can put whatever figures I want on at any given time. So folks, if you're looking to get into this challenge, watch my previous episode. I'll put the details in the description of this video as well. The deadline is April 1st. There are some things you have to send me, some photos. I would like something about you, a story, and the reason why that you love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So until then, we'll be working on some other projects, but we'll catch you next time.